and I'm a member of Congregation Beth since its original conception. I was born in St. Louis, Missouri in 1919. Life was good as I knew it at that time. I grew up without a father and grew in a religious home with my grandparents, my uncle and aunts, and my brother and a cousin. After that, I moved to Kansas City, Missouri, when I was 11 years old, and my mother had remarried at that time, and life was okay for me. I didn't know any better, I guess.
How old were you, and when did you enter the service?
I had my 21st birthday in the service in 1942. I got to camp. I went to Jefferson Barracks in St. Louis to be inducted, and then from there I went to Camp Barkley, Texas, with the 90th Infantry Division.
Did you encounter anti-Semitism in your experience in the military, and before, for that matter? Before and in the military?
There was always anti-Semitism in my life, in St. Louis, in Kansas City, and in the military. I ran across it. I was in the infantry, and very few Jewish people, and therefore I guess anti-Semitism was almost sure to bounce up and to come afore.
In what ways did it come up?
Well, it was in as much as I had some rank by that time. It was always not you, Irv. It's, you know, you're different. You're not the regular Jew. And so in the military, I had probably at least three court-martials for defending my Judaism.
When you went overseas, did you or your fellow troops hear about rumors about the camps in Germany?
Not at all. Never heard a word about any camps until at the beginning in France, Belgium, Holland, Germany. Up until Germany, or Holland really, I guess it was, that I heard about the first camps.
And what was it that you heard?
Just the fact that there was some that the Jews and the Christians were in slave labor camps, and that was about the gist of it until my company actually discovered a camp.
You mentioned that you were court-martialed 3 times for, quote, defending your duties. Can you give us some...
Sure. It was always in fights. I was I always felt that I fought for my rights. And so therefore, when somebody made a remark like that, I didn't accept it as what they were saying. I accepted that it was all Jews, including me. And therefore, I would get in fights with the guys. And in a fight in the military, you became, you had a court-martial, which is the same as going to any court. Only it's a three-member court of 3 officers. And then they either decide that you were right or wrong. In most cases, in as much as I initiated the fighting, I was wrong, and you would be reduced in rank from whatever you were to a private, and at the same time, you would be reinstated as 1 rank lower than what you were at the time.
I'm looking at your field jacket there, your dress jacket, and it's got quite a few ribbons. What campaigns were you in from the time you left the States?
Just the European campaigns, and 5 major battles in the European campaign, from France, Belgium, Holland, and Germany.
How did your unit come up onto the camps, and which ones did you liberate? Could you just describe what happened?
I can describe the camp. How we did it was just the fact of being at the right place to see it. and to be there as we were spearheading five different major battles. That was in that Ruhr area in the Ruhr area of Germany, and the camp was Nordhausen. It was a V2 factory where they made the V bombs, and the slave laborers there. When we got there, there were approximately 4,000, maybe 4,500 dead people there in the camp. They starved them to death. They worked them like 2 6-8-hour shifts a day and fed them very little. And when they got too weak to work, they would just let them die. And too weak to walk, they put them in a big barracks-like place, a big shed-like building, and then they just died there. And the ones that could move them over, they just piled them up in a pile. And some were buried in mass graves.
There were about 4,500 dead when you arrived. How many prisoners were still alive at that time?
I didn't see any prisoners alive, but then I wasn't the first one there either. You know, the company, the rest of the company, the rest of the division, there were other people there also in our in our division. So I did not see any alive. The bodies were not stiff and cold, and we did hear some shooting before we got there, so we assumed that the ones that were alive were killed as we approached the camp. I do have photos. And they were also used, part of my photos were used in the Yank magazine, which is a military paper. And these are the pictures of the camp. That's when I was working on some sighting equipment. Then we can go to Nordhausen if you'd like. Okay, in the background of this picture where there's the dead bodies is the building where they piled the bodies inside. And when they died, then they left them in a pile inside. When we got there, we had them pull them out of the piles and lay them out and try to identify them and count them and so forth. We went to the town of Nordhausen there and rounded up all the male people that lived in that town, regardless of their age. And we had them do the burial. Then the engineers came in and dug some long, narrow grave, and we had them carry them from this site to there on litters.
What was the reaction of the townspeople to all of this?
They didn't know it. They claimed that they didn't know that anything existed.
Believe that?
No, of course not. Of course not.
How far was the village from the camp, from the factory?
Oh, I would say probably less than a quarter of a mile.
So less than a quarter mile, and nobody knew anything.
That's true. So that's, you just knew that they were lying when they said that. This is some more of the townspeople carrying the bodies. Well, I think we were all very shocked, and of course, the stench and of the whole thing, we'd seen battle and we'd seen dead people, but we'd never seen anything like this. So it's a whole different ball game when you see a fellow soldier shot or killed or mutilated.
Did you notice any change in the feelings of your fellow soldiers towards Jews after this?
No, it wasn't talked about because the battles went on, and we moved right on after this towards Cologne and towards the major battles to end the war. So he really never talked about it other than the fact that when it was there and the generals were there to see it. And then I turned in my film to them, and that was about, and then I got some copies of them, and that was about the end of it as far as the concentration camp. This picture is some of the people that were carrying these dead bodies from the concentration camp to the gravesite. This is some more of the townspeople carrying the bodies. There was one group of 4 Germans carrying a body that didn't weigh 5 pounds. It was all skin and bones. And they set it down to rest, they said. I told them that they better not stop again or somebody would be carrying them. The condition of the bodies that those fellows were carrying that I was really perturbed with. And I haven't talked about this in 55 years.
Irwin, you say that you haven't really talked about this for 55 years. So when you came back, you didn't discuss this with people?
No.
Why is that?
I don't know. I really don't know. It just never discussed my war things with anybody until now.
In what way did this experience shape your life, the future? Or did it?
I'm sure it did. I'm sure it did. It was an experience that I wouldn't want to do again, but it was an experience that I wouldn't do without.
Irwin, what would you like to share with others who see this video? And in particular, what would you like to tell the people who say this didn't happen?
Well, I don't think there's any Jewish people that think that. And I think that thinks that are people who are not well read, not well educated, and really just plain stupid.
Irwin, what was your life like after the war? What did you do?
I really didn't do very much. I drank a lot, and I got a bartender's license, and I bartended, and I stayed drunk for 6 months.
Irwin, did you get any help with all of that after your service was over? Was it through the VA, or were there any services for soldiers who'd come back with these kind of experiences?
No.
Needed some assistance?
After that, I had a problem with, while I was still in uniform, I almost forgot, which was less than probably a week or 2 weeks after I got back to Kansas City. There was a man by the name of Gerald L.K. Smith. I don't know if anybody knows that name. Very anti-Semitic person. And he had a tent set up about 3 blocks from where I lived with my mother. He preached at that time that if you didn't believe in Jesus Christ, you shouldn't be allowed to live in the United States. So as I felt about Judaism, I went and heard his speech the first night. The second night, I sat in the front row, which I should have never done. And when he did that, I got up and I pulled him off the stage, and we had a fight. And I was put in jail that night. And then I got bond, and I got out of that. And the next night, I cut the wires to the electricity for his place. Anyway, that's a long story with Gerald L.K. Smith. And we went to court, and they postponed it. My lawyer postponed it each time it came up. They had false witnesses and so forth. And finally, we went to court, and I was fined $1 for disturbing the peace. And then Gerald L.K. Smith's temple in Kansas City, or church in Kansas City, wanted to pay the $1 fine of mine, which I wouldn't allow that to happen. And and then after being drunk for 6 months, I sobered up.
Bring a camp, all the difficulties of anti-Semitism you confronted in the service. How did those experiences impact you in terms of your Jewish identity?
I think they probably impacted me by being more Jewish than less. Although I'm not a religious person, and I did grow up in a very Orthodox home, I feel very Jewish. in every respect.
My name is Edith Palkowitz. I reside in Beim, California. I'm a member of Beth for the past 6 years. This is my biography for the war from 1943 to liberation. In 1943, the Germans marched into Budapest. By then, all Eastern Europe was occupied, except we did not know it. The whole thing was a rush. It only took a few hours for the Germans to occupy Budapest. As a 13-year-old, very naive girl, I kept on saying that nobody's going to hurt us because we were always good Hungarians and everything is going to be just fine. But nothing was fine. After a few minutes, loud rifle shots were heard. The soldiers broke our front door, the windows, and they screamed at us, "Mach schnell, mach schnell!" Immediately assembled in the courtyard. Our building had 2 staircases. One was used by the tenants, and the other was a spiral staircase used just for delivery and handymen. I took the regular staircase, as I always did. A very strong young SS soldier came over to me and started to hit me with the end of his rifle. "You lousy Jew, you belong on the delivery staircase." From the heavy beating, my teeth were loose, my head was bleeding, and I was scared and dizzy. He pushed me down 3 flights of the spiral staircase. The next thing I heard, the injured one go to one side of the courtyard and the others go to the other side of the courtyard. The ones that could not stand were shot immediately in front of us. They were my schoolmates, my friends, and relatives. With 3 or 4 years of killing experience, the soldiers did not hesitate to kill again and again. This was their forte. When my Aunt Ella saw me, she got scared. My Aunt Ella was my mother's sister, and with her husband Emery Horner, raised me with my grandma. She was afraid that they would shoot me because of the blood was running down on my face. She physically licked the blood off my head, never spitting out, but swallowing it time after time again. I lost my mother at an early age of 4, and my Aunt Ella and my grandmother took care of me and raised me. After we gathered all together in the courtyard, the soldiers took us to a stadium about 2.5 hours away. I was in pain with my loose teeth, my bleeding, and my walking was very difficult. It seemed forever. We got there, and this by itself was a miracle. We were told to sit on the benches in the stadium and wait for additional information. People were taken away slowly off the benches, and they became empty, one by one. On the loudspeaker, they announced that no one was allowed to leave the stadium, and in the morning, we would continue to be transported somewhere else. We were still sitting on the benches when Ella recognized one of the soldiers, who used to be her newspaper delivery boy for many, many years. She took a tremendous chance when she called him over and said, We are all beaten up. Please let us leave for a few hours and we'll be back in the morning. She gave the young man some cash and he escorted us from the stadium to the outside street. Ella had tipped the boy very, very well and gave him bonuses when he was young. And it looked like he remembered and was grateful. I guess it was payback time. It was totally unreal. I woke with my loose teeth, about 6 of them, beaten up, and my 72-year grandma dragging her feet, leaning on Ella and me. I was a fairly spoiled 13-year-old girl, just like any 13-year-old girl, and at that point I was getting strength from my terrible fear I felt. Perhaps this explanation doesn't make sense now, but it's the only explanation I have. When we left the stadium, it was well into the night. The 3 of us went to Ella's friend. They were not Jewish people and held a very high position with the government. I can only imagine how we must have looked when they opened the door. They welcomed us anyway with open arms. Later we find out the people leaving the stadium were transferred them to buses and to trains which took them to Auschwitz, Bergen-Belsen, and other various concentration camps. We stayed in this friend's house for 3 days. We cleaned up ourselves, and for the fear that they would not be prosecuted for hiding us, Ella and I left and Grandma stayed behind. Ella purchased 2 passes to stay in a safe house, which was under the Pope's protection with the Vatican flag flying very high. We were very, very happy and grateful. We settled into a 2-bedroom apartment with 27 other people. We realized right away that they had sold too many passes for a small apartment this size. At night, we walked over on each other. When they had to use the bathroom, sometimes they didn't make it in time, and I felt the urine on my face almost every night. It was still better than being on the street with the shooting and the army tanks rolling down the streets just looking for poor, innocent Jews, children and old people. It really didn't make a difference to them. It seemed the city had one purpose, and one purpose only, to kill the Jews, all the Jews. After 10 days staying in a safe house, we found out that the Vatican only issued the pass for 14 days. They had never told us that at the time we purchased them. The passes were very expensive. After 14 days, we were told to leave, and the tickets was resold to other Jews who did not know this gimmick. It was a very profitable business. When we were chased out of the safe house, we were taken to ghettos. Every morning we were marching on the street until late afternoon under the soldiers' supervision. We were made an example of how Jews should be treated. We were severely abused, beaten and stoned. People threw pots and pans on us. I remember I wanted to step on the sideline in order to miss the beating. A soldier took his rifle and pushed me right back. All ages were walking, mothers with small children and others. We had the yellow star on our clothing so we would not be mistaken for somebody else. This went on for many, many months. I really don't remember how long. When I thought it could not get worse, somehow Ella was pushed out of the line and we got separated. Well, to me this moment was the unbelievable rock bottom. I was still 13 years old. I was sure that would be much better than life in the ghettos. We only had some water and about 1 or 2 slices of bread a day. The soldiers picked up the ladies, young and old, took them to their offices, kept them for many hours, sometimes for days, raped them and raped them all over again. Some never came back to the building, and the others did not, and the others were bleeding in pain and wished they hadn't come back alive. People were afraid to speak to each other because they were afraid of spies. At night I was planning to get away. I did not speak to anybody, so I spoke a lot to myself. On one of those marches I broke away. I really wanted to know how Ella and Grandma is. My Aunt Ella had a very exclusive store in Budapest where she sold expensive linens. She sold custom-made monogram merchandise, only sold to order. One of her clients gave us 2 crosses, one for Ella and one for me. She made us promise her that we would carry them all the time with us. She said it was blessed by the Holy Mother. I did not know anything about the Holy Mother. I did not have a clue about anything holy or otherwise. We did not practice religion at all, only went to the temple on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and very secretly. I was now 14 years old, but definitely not the naive girl who said everything was fine because we are good people. Well, when I tried to walk away from the line, I was not successful. I thought if I walk on the side of the line, then perhaps I could get out of the line. On this occasion, a soldier pointed his rifle at me and said, "Stop or I will shoot. Show me your identification papers," pointing the rifle at me at all times. I started to shake. I did not have any papers with me. I could hardly stand, and in nervousness I dropped my purse. Everything fell out, including the cross. When he saw the cross, he said, "Just go." Today, after over 50 years, I remember exactly the feeling I had, and I still get the chills. First I bent down to get my purse, and when I got up, I couldn't believe it, that it was okay. I was okay. All of a sudden, I didn't know what to do with myself. I had to get my thoughts together. I wanted to see Grandma and find Ella. I took some buses, a few of them, and I realized I didn't know the friend's address where Grammy was staying. I knew the vicinity. Finally, I found the house and said hello to the friends. I remembered the first looked at me and didn't recognize me at all. When I said I was here to see Grams, they were very happy to see me. I was told that Ella came to visit a few times, and she was hiding with friends and trying to find me. I knew I was not able to stay at this house for more than 3 days for the fear of risking their lives. A friend of a friend of a friend recommended me to be a mother's helper with a family. The family, of course, did not know I was Jewish. The family had 4 children. I spent most of my time playing with the children, and they were lovely people. I was very content again. After being there for 4 months, food became very scarce for everyone. We did not have healthy men at homes as they went all to the war, so out of necessity, some strong women went out to the streets and cut up the horses which has been shot to death. They cut the meat up, brought it in the house. Some people roasted the horses, some made soup out of it. When I hesitated to eat it, I was told that the horses were the cleanest animal, and I was very hungry. One morning when I got up, I heard the soldiers yelling, and there were a lot of commotions. Everybody realized the Russians had came into the city, and the Hungarians and the German armies were fighting with the Russians. In our apartment building, the Germans and the Russians were fighting every day, floor by floor, back and forth. It seemed the Russians liberated us, but we did not feel free until the Americans and the British Army took over. So finally it was over. I said goodbye to the family I worked for. I went to see Grandma, and finally I saw Ella after so many months. It was almost a year. The city looked like us, completely beaten. We were bombed, flattened by tanks and other warfare machines. Not a single building was undamaged. Food was next to none, and Ella and I went to the railroad to travel to small villages where the war had not ruined everything, so they had food supply. The magnitude of people who came back injured from the camps, ghettos, from Russia and other hell on earth was unbelievable. They were hoping to find parents, children, and siblings, but the result was very disappointing. People were digging with their hands under the rubble, hoping to find relatives. In Budapest, hundreds of soap bars appeared that were made by the Germans after the gas executions. Every bar had the abbreviated name of a camp where it came from. We purchased those bars, hundreds of them, from the gypsies who were selling it, and we took them to the Jewish cemetery and we buried them. I would like to remember my father, Miklos Steiner. In January of 1943, many blackboard signs were posted. It said, any Jewish male between the age of 25 and 50 to report to different locations with the penalty of immediate death. My father was 35 years old. He was the most handsome man. He had a baritone voice and sang like an opera star. We said goodbyes to each other. I felt my heart was cut out again. I lost my mother, Elizabeth, when I was 4 years old. She had a brain tumor. The Germans took my father to Kiev, Russia. It was a hard labor camp. I felt I had lost my mother all over again. The prisoners were taken out in 30 below zero to build a bridge. If they collapsed, they were beaten until they died. My father and the rest of the prisoners were used as human mine detectors. My dad stepped on a mine. On one leg was torn off completely, and the other leg was torn off from the knee down. He was taken to the hospital. Before the Russians liberated Kiev, the Germans poured gasoline on the hospital and burned it to the ground. One of the male nurses who survived told us that Daddy had a blanket and said to him, Michael, you take this. I will never need it again. Michael survived and lives in Pittsburgh. Later, the Red Cross sent us a telegram confirming my dad's death. Grandma Horner was my only grandpa, and I was his only grandchild. We actually adored each other, and I worshipped him. Two very high decorated soldiers came to the house and spoke to Imre. The soldiers said, it is unavoidable that Imre will not have to go to a labor camp, but his father, Grandpa Horner, could be saved. If they signed over the deed to their house, Grandpa would be saved. We all agreed to do so, and the deed was signed over and transferred. Unfortunately, the ink wasn't dry yet. When down the street about a mile away, my grandpa was shot and was thrown out of the car to the street.
If you look back, was there anything you or your family could have done differently?
Differently? Under the circumstances? Absolutely not. Absolutely, I usually think back, should I have done this, should I have done that? Maybe it would avoid some pain and suffering, but there was nothing. I think, under the circumstances, my family and I were intelligently thinking what to do. And that's what we did. Circumstances changed day by day. There wasn't any plan to do. The best example in the Vatican House. We thought we were safe, but we didn't know it was only for 14 days.
Before the war, when you were much younger, were you aware of the animosity between the Hungarian civilians and the Jews?
I never said in school I was Jewish. I never said in school. We didn't have any Jewish classes or anything, but I prayed with the Christians, and I never said anything. I was Jewish. I kneeled, and I guess that acting made me stronger again. Because every time I did it, I felt, I'm not doing this for real. I'm just doing it to survive.
And this is even before the war.
That before the war.
So the animosity or the hatred was there long before the war.
It was in their blood. I mean, the soldiers knew about that the Germans occupied all Eastern Europe 4 years before we found out. But the higher positioned people were informed, I'm sure.
What brought you through this? Where did you get the strength from to keep going?
The strength to survive and tell the people what happened. They would never believe it. And I feel if a live person tells them, perhaps they will believe it.
There were some people who did assist you, though, who were Hungarian, I take it, and Gentile?
And I made that very clear, that they weren't Jewish people. They didn't have to do it. They risked their lives. But on the other hand, we were very conscientious about it. We wouldn't stay there longer to have them get into trouble. Or because there was no court or trials. There's nothing. They dragged you out and they shot you.
Edith, if you look back out of all of what you had to endure, what would be the memory that you're most proud of in terms of what you did or any actions or behavior? What came out of this as a source of pride for you?
First of all, I will never ever forget some of the Christian people who helped me. It always stays with me, and I'm emphasizing it to my children. Do not judge people of their religion or their creed. They're good ones and bad ones. That's one thing. You know what? I'm most proud of it that I survived. I didn't do only one thing or two things. I never did anything bad. I never hurted anybody, although I wanted to. But I was so young. I didn't understand the whole thing.
Were you able to share what you had experienced when you came, or were people not willing to talk about it, or were you not willing to talk about it?
I would try to, and I like to educate people and make them understand that history could repeat itself. Perhaps not with the Jews, perhaps not with the Iraq people, but history could repeat itself, and you know what? It is repeating itself. I like to talk about it. It's very painful for me. I didn't sleep last night at all, thinking that I have to read this, but I'm happy to do it. If there is a chance, then somebody's going to watch this one time and perhaps see and believe what was then. I remember in social studies, I saw a big globe in the classroom on my teacher's desk. I was always turning it and played with it to see how big the world really is. During this wartime, I have asked so many times, where are the rest of the people of the world? They do not see or hear our cries? Are they blind and deaf? When it comes to the war and to the Holocaust, I'm not a forgiving person. I went to therapy with a group in New York with other Holocaust survivors for about 20 years. I was told I had to forgive in order to free myself. Well, I cannot forgive or forget. Nobody should forget. That is our only hope, that history will not repeat itself ever again.
Oh, I was born in Tiszafüred. This is the centrally located city in Hungary. But I lived in Budapest. They took me from Budapest.
So what was your life like before the war and all things?
I was going to school till they let me. They wouldn't accept me into the gymnasium. They were accepting only 3% of the student body, Jews.
So as a child, you already had some anti-Semitic.
Oh, well, we always had it. We always had it. We don't know what it means. I was going to school, and I had a German teacher, and my grandfather helped me translate something. And of course, I read it proudly. And I was punished because she said, "That's not German, that's Yiddish." So it was mixed in Yiddish, yes, it was. But I didn't know it, I didn't realize it.
So when you were growing up, there were incidents that made you feel different?
Oh yes, absolutely. We had to be the best student. In the classroom we were two Jewish. I went to a private school, so it was 2 Jewish girls, me and another girl. And we always had to be excellent, because otherwise we were ignored, punished, disciplined.
What was your life like in other ways as a child growing up?
Otherwise, spoiled rotten. Basically, I grew up with my grandparents and my uncle and the maid. And the dog was pulling my little wagon around the yard. That's how I grew up. I didn't know till I went to Budapest that anything else exists than that.
So you felt pretty happy and secure?
Oh yes, oh yes. Till, you don't realize it till you get a little older, that the kids shun you, the kids tease you.
So it's just part of life.
That was part, yes. It was just kid stuff.
Do you have brothers and sisters?
We were 5 of us. I had 2 brothers and 2 sisters.
And where are you in the order?
Second. Well, my brother was the oldest who got killed. He was the one.
So growing up was you felt pretty okay.
Oh yes, I didn't miss anything.
And how about Judaism? Did that play any part in your childhood?
My grandparents were Orthodox. My parents didn't follow much of anything except for bar mitzvahing my brother, the oldest one, because the youngest one was 12 years old when they were liberated.
Your Jewish education, did you have any growing up?
Before I went to private school, my grandparents got me a Catholic priest to teach me Hebrew, how to read. I'm not joking, I'm very serious. People don't believe me, but in a Catholic religion, you have to learn Latin and Hebrew to be able to read the Old Testament.
Anything else that you felt particularly unique about your childhood?
I don't really, I didn't think anything about my, it's flowed by beside not taking me into the gymnasium with my grades. This was the biggest thing. That was my biggest thing.
So when did it become apparent to you that there was something that was stirring up in your life and was going to begin to cause?
Well, my father, when I lived in Budapest, my father never let me go out of the house without a chaperone. And then they made us move. We had to leave our home. We had to go to Jewish houses, apartments. And we could have only 2 square meter per person. So with our extended family, we get together to get a larger apartment. And then they came, my father was already taken away.
How old were you when this all began to happen?
13, 14. And my father was taken away. And my mother used to black market because we had no food. They allowed us to go out 2 hours a day to the market. And that time was between 12 and 2, which is, everything had to be closed down. And so she black marketed, and she didn't sold it. She shared it, and we used to yell at her that she putting all of us in jeopardy. And then they came in every once in a while, and they were asking for workers. They came in and they asked, let's say, somebody from 16 to 25, okay? Everybody had to go outside, and they took them away. Then...
So you were still too young?
Yeah, I didn't have to go. And the night before I left, my brother already had to go, my older brother. And he ran away, and they caught him. And he came home with a head swollen like this. They caught him and they beat him, but they let him go. So when they came again to collect people, and they asked from 16 to 40, my mother was 39. And this was in October. In January, she would have been 40. She wouldn't admit it. She was a very vain person when it comes to that. She wouldn't admit it that she's gonna be 40. So she went out, and when I seen her going, and I didn't want them to come to our apartment because my brother was hidden between the mattresses. They shouldn't take him. He was all swollen and beaten up. And when they took my mother went out. I went after her because she was sick. And my friends, when they seen my mother out, they came too. 2 of my friends from the building. And we marched. We worked during the day and marched during the night, and I marched 500 kilometers.
You were still with your mother at that time?
I was with my mother. They carried a kitchen, like not open kitchen, and they had their supplies. I don't know what kind of supplies. A friend of mine was go-getter, shall I put it that way. This was Hungarian soldiers, Hungarian, what's the name, Nazis. And he talked to them, I don't know what he said, but they let my mother go in a wagon because she wasn't feeling good. Then, of course, my mother picked up kids like me to stay with us, not to be alone. And we shared whatever we had. We stole on the ground as we marched. We stole carrots, potatoes, the fields, whatever we could find. My mother had to have water, fluid. I couldn't get any water. I stole from the cat the milk, what they put on the farmers. And my mother shared it. And when I told her I risked my life to steal the milk, she said she had just one answer. She has nobody to get it for her. So she shared it. We didn't get any food. They cooked all day long, the food. While we were digging ditches trenches for the soldiers, because they were retreating from the front, from the Russian front. And we were digging trenches. And the trenches were taller than I was. And they were cooking dinner for us. And every time, when it came time to eat, they poured it to the ground and made us march some more. And then they said that we have to go in onto the cattle cars. My mother was very, very, very sick. I gave her everything that was valuable of mine because they told me that she can't come with us, that she's gonna go home, back to Budapest. So as I was walking out, there was the Hungarian police, and I asked what's gonna be with her, because there were 2 pregnant women and my mother. And I asked what's gonna be with them, and she says, which one? I said, my mother. Oh, you want to know what's going to happen to her with them? He took out his gun and turned around and shot my mother. They put us in the cattle cars. All you could do is stand with a pail. It was so cold that from the metal, we scraped up the ice inside with all these people in it. And that's what we drank. And once in a while, they threw in a bunch of bread, And every morning, they came to take out the dead. We ended up in Bergen-Belsen. We had to completely take off everything, and men, women, children, doesn't matter. We all had to go. And it was winter. Nothing else. I was having a layer of clothing, sweaters, and we had to leave everything there. Pictures. My sweater was sewn and my mother sewed in gold. Everybody, she did that, sewed in a padding, gold. Everything we left there. And my job was to go to the field with a wagon and dig up Reuben. What is Reuben? It's those white vegetable, whatever it is. Turnips, yes. And we had to bring it in a wagon, pull the wagon, bring the wagon. And that's for the kitchen. I was very fortunate. My blanket partner was a rabbi's daughter. Her name was Sarah. Well, she was maybe 10 years older than I was, and she watched out for me. And sometimes we sneaked out. We had a SS soldier with a German Shepherd and a 9-tail. You know what's a 9-cat-tail? Then whip, yeah. And around 3-4 o'clock, when she get drunk, she used to come into the barrack, and he yelled, "Zählappell." That's German, means counting. We had to go out in the snow and stand there hours in a certain distance from each other. And my friend's mother collapsed. She couldn't, or moved, or whatever. Anyway, they shot her. And then it was nothing, we went back. But this happened every other day, you know. And the doors always opened in a wrong way, and the dog was in behind us, you know, and she was hitting us with the leather whip. Now, I'm alive because I decided I have to have food. And whoever bought in the, you know, when we get food, we get carrots always, with the top, bottom, mud, everything. They just boiled it. And whoever took back the containers to the kitchen could lick it out. You see, that's going to give you extra food. So it's going to be pretty soon, on the 13th of February. I decided today is going to be my turn. I fought my way. I bartered my way that I'm going to carry back the cattle with the other, you know, a two-handle, and we held it. But we stopped in somewhere where you know that we were safe, and we started with our hand to take out whatever we could, extra what was left in it. And a bunch of young German soldiers were there, and we were all young. And target practiced, and I got shot in my heel. And nobody would stop. Nobody. The barracks, we didn't have windows, we had cutouts. And they called us Panie Popolski. Do you know that, what it means? No. Are you Polish? When I said no, Majarski, they never wanted to help me. But this rabbi's daughter got somebody else, and they put me in a blanket and took me to the hospital barrack. And they put paper bandage on the wound. Didn't clean, nothing. We were so dirty. But as I say, that's why I survived, because they let me stay in a hospital barrack. I could see men running to the fence and get electrocuted. And they left them there for 2-3 days for us to see it. And as I say, we had, being the youngest in the barrack, we had 3 tiers beds, whatever you call it. And I was on the top because I was young. And we had to have 3 in it. And they always kicked my foot, and I complained that nobody cared. But I slept for 3 days with dead people because they weren't kicking. They weren't kicking anymore. I was very weak, of course. I get typhus, and they were hiding me. They covered my head, that when they come in to check who is sick, very sick, or who is dead, they shouldn't, It was horrible. We had over 10,000 dead people above ground, and who could walk, took this part of the flesh out of them and ate it, because there was no food, was nothing. Once in a while they shoved through, somebody was good, from the kitchen, and they shoved through the window, the opening, they shoved through moldy bread, but they get it out of the garbage from the Germans. My leg got infected, my knee was like this, my whole feet. And the German doctors came in. And they took they asked who is sick, what's wrong with them, and they pointed me out that I have this problem. Says, I don't know, tomorrow, next day, we have to cut off her leg. That's meant above the knee. And I told the other bunk that I commit suicide before I jumped down, from the third bunk, before I let them cut my leg. So during the night, a Czechoslovakian doctor came in. She was the one who bandaged if you get shot or set, whatever. And she gave me 2 aspirin, cut up the paper bandage, which cut into never was changed. God forbid, never was changed. From February till April was never changed. She cut off the bandage, and she had like a tray, it's like a split, where you split when they surgery. I had 3 of them full of pus, like that. And one day, when the light came on, we don't see any Germans. We didn't see anybody. Guards, they with the electric fence, they still patrolled it, and they had the tower. We don't see anybody. We ask, we try to get somebody's attention who is walking outside to tell us what's going on. They don't know. All the Germans disappeared. And in afternoon, no, I don't remember. The British came in. They didn't expect to have a camp there. They had nothing. The British had absolutely nothing except what the daily ration, what they could carry on them. That's the only they had. And they gave it to us. Those are canned ration, But we were sick people. We couldn't take that rich food, And they took us out to the sun, put blanket out, We were full of lice, body lice, head lice. We were full of lice. And they gave us their food. They had powdered milk, everything. They were sick just watching us. They took us out to the grounds in a blanket from the hospital. And they showed us, they caught some Germans, and they were carrying the latrines, and because up till now, the Jews used to carry in wagons and think out the latrine, what we dug, we had to dig that, the dirt. So, anyway. After that, I caught dysentery, and I heard them when the doctors came, and they said, "What a shame! She survived the camp. Now she's dying." And I said, "Hell no!" You learn to swear, but good, believe it or not. I fought like crazy. You learn to survive, believe it or not, you learn to survive. And somebody came who lived in our building and said, "How come you are not with your brother?" I said, "Where is my brother?" He said, "We seen him last week here. He was here, he had still his clothing on. They bought him from another camp, probably. He had his clothing on, that meant gold, and he looked pretty good, strong." So, about 10 days before liberation, they came to the camp and they asked for young men for easy work. And all he wanted to do is get out of that full of lies, to get out of that camp. And he volunteered. And they took him to Theresienstadt, straight to the fire, the crematorium, straight. And then I found people who were with my father in Yugoslavia. And they told me that the partisans killed 20 Germans, so they took 200 Jews and they hung them, and one was my father.
How did you keep your spirituality, or did you, through the experience?
If you don't believe in God, you never survive. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I was in a concentration camp. I didn't eat the little piece of bread what I get at Yom Kippur. I won't eat it. They stole it from me, but I won't eat it. It's something you're born with, okay? My grandparents were Orthodox, and it was knocked into me that you certain things, you certain things you just don't do. And because I was very young with them, I learned.
You continued to believe in God through the whole experience?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Who you turn when everybody's against you? Because the person who is sleeping in the bed next to you will kill you for the piece of bed you have. Who do you turn to? No, when I talk about it, I get very... It's not right now, because you're facing me, when I am alone. At night. It comes back. And I don't like to hate. But nobody believes it, that you can be an animal. I never told anything to my children, And I couldn't talk about it with love, and I didn't want to teach them hate, and you couldn't.
What would you want children, other people to understand that might help them in some way?
To tolerate people as they are. Take a person as they are, not by religion, by a thief is a thief is a thief, okay? But if you are a working or normal person, why can't you be taken as a normal person? It's so, why you have to be taken by religion? Or by short, fat, whatever, okay, foreign. Just take you as a person. You don't have to like everybody, okay? You can't like everybody.
You would teach tolerance.
That's it. You don't have to like everybody. You love your family. You have a few people who rather be with. But you can't love everybody.
How about Jewish children? Is there anything you'd want to say to them?
You learn your history. Learn your history.